You ever stop and wonder if the gap between the rich and the poor is just a fact of life, something we can't change? It's a huge question, one that's been asked throughout history. In this explainer, we're going to jump right in and look at what really drives inequality and whether it's truly inevitable.
So, to really get a handle on this, we first have to see what inequality actually looks like on the ground. And to do that, let's take a look at one of the most unequal countries on the planet. Get this, in South Africa, the richest 0.1%, that's a tiny sliver of people, they own almost 30% of the entire country's wealth. Now think about that for a second. That is more than double what the bottom 90% of the population owns, all combined. It's just a staggering gap. And it's not like this is a recent thing. When economists and historians dig back through time, the pattern is just crystal clear. They find inequality everywhere they look. Seriously, not one single society has ever been found without it. Which, leads us right back to that fundamental, kind of bleak question. If it's always been with us, does that mean it always has to be? Is inequality just inevitable?
Okay, so if we're going to answer that, we've got to have a way to actually measure the problem. How do you put a number on something as complex as a country's level of inequality?
Well, the most common tool for this is something called the Gini index. It sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's a number you get by comparing the wealth distribution in a perfectly equal society, where everyone has the same amount, with the actual distribution in the real world. The size of that gap, that's your Gini index. The scale is pretty simple. It goes from 0 to 1. A Gini of 0 means perfect equality. Everyone has the exact same slice of the pie. A Gini of 1 means perfect inequality. One person has absolutely everything and everyone else has nothing. Now, obviously, you never actually see either of these extremes in real life. They're just the goalposts. So, where do real countries actually land? Well, if you look at developed countries today, their typical after-tax Gini indexes usually hang out around 0.3. But, and this is important, even that one number hides a really wide range of outcomes, from countries that are pretty equal to those that are pretty unequal. But, and this is a big but, the Gini index doesn't tell you the whole story. Not even close. It's just one number. It can't tell you about the disparities between, say, different races or genders. It doesn't show you how easy or hard it is for someone to climb out of poverty. And it gives you zero insight into how a society got to be as unequal as it is. It's a starting point for sure, but it's not the final word. All right, so we know inequality is everywhere, and we have a way to put a number on it. The next logical question is, why? A huge part of the answer lies in the economic systems that societies decide to build. And this right here is absolutely crucial. Inequality isn't some natural force like gravity or the weather. A huge portion of it is shaped by the choices that governments make. To put it simply, policy matters a lot. I mean, just look at the 20th century. Some countries, like the Soviet Union and China, they made this huge shift to communism, partly to crush inequality. And in a way, it worked. Inequality dropped, dramatically. The problem? Prosperity didn't follow. People earned about as much as their neighbors, but, well, that just wasn't very much. Now, check this out because this is where it gets really interesting. Look at what happened when China started shifting toward capitalism in the late 70s. Look at these numbers. Its Gini index, remember that's the measure of inequality, it shot up from below 0.4 to over 0.55, so much, much more unequal. But at the very same time, its per capita income exploded from around $1,500 to over $13,000. So way more wealth, but a much more unequal distribution of it. So it seems like you've got this tough choice, right? Do you want prosperity or do you want equality? But it turns out it's not quite that simple. That brings us to the specific choices governments can make inside a capitalist system to really shape their societies. So does embracing capitalism mean you're just doomed to high inequality? It's kind of tempting to think that, right? But lots of capitalist countries prove that's just not the case. You look at places like France, Denmark, and the Netherlands, they have shown that it's absolutely possible to manage and even decrease inequality. So how do they do it? Well, taxes are a huge tool. This chart is fascinating. It shows that before taxes, income inequality in France and the US is actually pretty similar. But look what happens after taxes and government programs kick in. Post-tax inequality in France is about 20% lower. That, right there, is the power of a more progressive tax and benefit system in action. And then there's another big tool, government transfers.
This is basically taking tax money and giving it to people through things like social security programs. In Italy, about a quarter of an average household's income comes directly from these transfers. Now compare that to the US, where it's just over 5%. That is a massive difference in policy choice. So when you put it all together, governments have this whole toolkit they can pull from. They can choose to implement more progressive tax systems. They can use transfers to build stronger social safety nets. They can invest heavily in broad access to education and healthcare, creating more opportunity for everyone. They can work to bridge the digital divide, and they can even find ways to deal with the influence that extreme wealth can have on the democratic process itself.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We've seen that inequality is, kind of everywhere, but just how severe it gets is very much a matter of choice. But there's one last really powerful idea we need to understand about why this is such a tough, persistent challenge.
This really gets to the heart of the whole problem. Think about it. Wealth and power create this feedback loop. They tend to protect themselves and expand themselves. Equality, on the other hand, doesn't have that kind of built-in engine. If you just leave a society to its own devices, it will naturally tend to drift towards greater and greater inequality, unless there is a conscious, active effort to push back against it. And that leaves us with the ultimate question. If we know that inequality isn't inevitable, it's not a done deal, but it is the natural direction of things, then the real challenge for all of us is this. What choices will we make to weaken those powerful feedback loops of wealth and power concentration?